I think we just want to dive into what your overall feeling is, because we talk about it every single day here. We spend a lot of time throughout the offseason discussing. I think everybody's kind of in an agreement here of it feels like what we're going to see from the Vancouver Canucks is they're hoping for a chance to just be in a wild card position. Is that the outside view of the Vancouver Canucks as well?
Well, that's the hope, but here's the thing. My prediction is I think they get there. And I think this division is incredibly difficult. I think you've got a few authentic Stanley Cup contenders in it. I also think the Central Division creates an opening for the Pacific to grab all 5 remaining spots. And I really like the way this Vancouver offseason unfolded for a number of reasons. One, I liked that the drama and the hysteria that sort of surrounded this team, the soap opera stuff, seemed to go away. 2, I'm banking on a healthy Thatcher Demko playing like he did down the stretch. And 3, I really like how they revamped this defense core. There's not, a super sexy addition. There's no headliner, no $9 million guy that you've added to your roster, no Erik Karlsson. But I don't think they needed that. I think they needed proper support from 1 through 6. And I think Susie and I think Ian Cole are going to be really big additions to this team. And you take all of that and you mix that up with what should be a lot better compete. 10-0 preseason loss notwithstanding from Rick Tocchet on the bench. And I think you've got all the makings for a team to make a pretty significant improvement.
I think what a lot
compelling or not?
Yeah, and I agree with. I mean, there's a lot of our very positive fans who are looking at it of like, okay, the steps that you're going to see from the Stars is also going to be the big difference. But ultimately, I think you nailed it. It's the coaching staff and how they're going to change this team, because we saw the point totals last year for Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes. Doesn't mean anything. Like, what was the biggest lacking thing that you saw from the Canucks? You mentioned structure, kind of just new coaching staff coming in. We're pretty excited to see what this coaching staff is going to do with this squad, specifically what they have on the back end. Goaltending, you meant like Thatcher Demko coming back healthy. What would be the thing that would maybe keep this team from being able to get to that spot? Because you sound pretty confident, Frank. I'm not going to lie.
What would keep them from it? Lack of consistency, a poor start, injury. I mean, those are all really things that add up over time. Any one of those things could sink your season. And I think what held this team back last year was defense. I thought what they were asking of some guys, especially some of the younger guys that didn't have a ton of experience, they were asking for players to play over their heads. And I don't think that exists anymore.
Okay, I got a question for you, Frank. Where in the Pacific does this team rank? Because we just saw them lose 10-0 to the Calgary Flames. So everybody's wondering, like, how do you have the Pacific kind of playing out? Because you just said you think all 5 teams are going to get in, but does that mean the Canucks are in the 5th spot?
Yeah, I think what you're looking at is one of the wild card positions. I think, by the way, like, I don't put any stock at all in the preseason, and especially that 10-0. Like, look at the lineup that the Canucks iced. Like, they weren't bringing the goods. And I do think from a pride and competitive standpoint, you should probably try and knuckle down a little bit more to make sure it doesn't get out of hand like that. And that's surely something that they're talking about today, is that preseason, whether it matters or not, you need to put in an effort. But when it comes to sizing up the whole Pacific, I've got it in my head something like this. Edmonton, Vegas, then LA, followed by the Flames, Canucks, and Kraken.
If I were to ask you about the 4 teams you have above the Canucks, which one are you least confident? Is it the Kraken just right ahead of the Vancouver Canucks, or which one would you be least confident about?
So I had the Kraken out.
Okay.
Kraken are out of the playoffs in Frank's ranking, which is what I was going to respond to, and I think that's very interesting. You have explain that. The Kraken below the Canucks. Explain that.
I just think when you look at the year Seattle had last year, I don't want to say it was an anomaly or a fluke. They had so many guys have career years that I really have. It feels like it was lightning in a bottle. that it was so many guys shooting percentages were crazy high. They got production out of players that you were not like. Can Daniel Sprong go and have the same season again this year? Maybe. I mean, but probably pretty unlikely. I also think their goaltending was atrocious, and it's not getting any better, I don't think. So that, coupled with some regression from some other players, could the Kraken be one of those wild card teams? Could you flip flop any one of the Flames, Canucks, or Kraken in that ranking? Of course you could. I could see that happening where the Kraken are 4 and the Flames are 6, but I've got the Canucks right there with those teams.
Jim Rutherford gave the quote, and I think everybody in the market agreed with it, that the Canucks have a playoff team if everything goes right. And Aaron, can we hear it? Just can we pull up the clip where Rutherford said they have a playoff team if everything goes right?
It's actually just an instrumental for Frank.
Every season you have to judge the management and the coaches, and that's what we do in sports. Okay, I think, to be very to the point, the changes that we made, we have a playoff team if everything goes right. Okay, your goalie has to be good, your specialty teams have to be good, you can't get into a lot of injuries. Okay, no, I'm not saying if one of those things go wrong we can't still make it, because we have some impact players that can win games by themselves. Okay, but we want to get to a point that we have enough in our lineup that you can have a few things go wrong on a regular basis and overcome that. But to be frank with you, that's my opinion. It may not be these guys' opinion, but that's how I feel about the team we have right now.
So it seemed like everybody in the market agreed with that statement. So I'm not going to ask you if you agree with that, because I'm assuming to some level you do. But my question to you is, instead, when we look at teams like the Flames and the Kraken, are they also in that conversation of being where, hey, if everything goes right, we can be a playoff team? Like, I guess my question is, do the Canucks just need things to go more right for them than they do for those teams?
I think that's a really fair way to put it, because I just mentioned the idea of flip-flopping them in the standings. Jacob Markstrom comes out and has another 892 season. I'm sorry, I don't care. The Flames aren't making it. I don't care how well Jonathan Huberdeau plays or how many goals he scores, or, Mackenzie Weegar, how well he plays in the back end. It's not going to matter. There are fatal flaws, I think, to all these teams. And let's be real. When you look at the Canucks from the last few seasons, more or less everything that could go wrong has. Right? The poor starts. They essentially tanked their season a couple times before you even got to U.S. Thanksgiving. You had last year that coincided with a really tough run for Thatcher Demko to start, and then a few months on the shelf. So, like, those things really take its toll. And I think the estimation and expectation setting from Jim Rutherford was really fair. He's acknowledging that this team isn't perfect, that they do have flaws, but there's also an acknowledgement there that there are some really good pieces on this team, in this lineup, that can be game breakers. Pettersson, Hughes, Demko. And it's the same sort of triumvirate, the same sort of core that, we've been talking about the last few years, that I think can really do something. And when you consider, like, here's really maybe the better way to frame your question, I think, from the total, sort of 30,000 foot view of, like, let's look 5 years down the line. If you had to pick a team in its current state, with its players at the ages that they are, with the contractual situations with the way that they are, which team would you pick? For me, I think there's a lot to say about the Kraken and their cap space and some of the prospects that they have coming, but I'm not certain that I'm picking any of those teams ahead of the Canucks.